Namaste.
Namaste.
Well, since it's the end of the weekend, is there anything coming up with anyone that you care to share, or any questions about your sadhana or the weekend or anything that's going on?
Ramana, can you share what the significance is of meditating with eyes open?
I'm sorry?
Can you share what the significance is of meditating with eyes open?
Of meditating with eyes open?
Yeah, the advantages of that.
When you're able to meditate with your eyes open, the benefit is the process of being able to function with eyes open. In other words, when you're actively meditating while you're being active, that's really the benefit. And when it's just quiet times, as we have just completed here, it's just as beneficial to be meditate with eyes closed. But if you're having difficulty remembering to keep your inquiry going while you're active, then it's beneficial to do so with your eyes closed. Open. And if you're having difficulty staying alert in the quiet time, then it's better to meditate with your eyes open. But the nice thing about inquiry, it's either eyes open or closed, doesn't really matter as far as doing the inquiry itself, returning consciousness back to the source. It really doesn't matter. Once you have come into the heart fully, dissolve the tendency to externalize consciousness, then when you are with eyes open, if you're living in the self, when you're with eyes open, you'd call that sahaja samadhi. And with eyes closed, you would call it nirvikalpa samadhi. Okay. Okay, Nancy?
I'm actually curious about your sadhana, your sitting meditation times like these, and particularly the morning ones when we go for several hours.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious what your experience might be just sitting for a few hours like this?
Well, I'm in a place in which there is actually no experience occurring. Experience usually, all experience as such is actually a mind activity, in which it's the I having an experience. But in the stillness of being, there is no experience. There's only being. And being is not an experience from a mental point of view. It's a mindless state. There is no mind. So it's just awareness, being itself, or consciousness being itself. You'd like it to two mirrors facing one another. There's no object to be reflected one to the other. There's just spaceless, faceless, formless awareness, timeless, just being. Being itself. Not being this or that, but no thing, no one, no time, no space, no where, no when. But being fully alert as being. It's words to try to describe that state are actually inadequate because that state is prior to the mind. It's free of mind, and words are all mental.
Yet somewhere in there, are you aware that yes, there is this body sitting in a chair, and there's a clock on the wall that you tap in?
I can come to that awareness, but no, while I'm just sitting in silence, there's no awareness of a body or anyone or anywhere or any time or any place. There's only just being itself.
And then, like you said though, then you can come into that space of a body or notice the clock and...
Yes, I'm kind of aware then that it's like coming from a state of deep sleep into the state of dream, in which now there are forms around, situations appearing to occur, or people present, but to me it's just like a dream happening.
Or again, you can go in and out of that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Y'all don't like my sweater, huh? Okay. Okay, so John?
Earlier today and yesterday we had talked about during the lunchtime about a lot of new teachers coming out, and specifically Advaita teachers. A lot of new books and literature is out there. I was just wondering, how can we tell between someone who is a realized being and coming from the heart, from that spaceless space, as opposed to someone who might have had some satori or experiences and then coming, understanding it intellectually and just saying it? I remember reading in, I think, I Am That, where Maharaj, Nisargadatta Maharaj says that sometimes people feel energized after a length of meditation, and they feel little liberated from their mind, and they start like writing books or start a center or these kind of things. Usually the way I see is that if I feel freer and feel an expansion within myself with a lot of love coming up, and there's a lot of peace which kind of is evoked in me, I feel that this is the right place, this is like the right thing to read or to connect with. I would like to hear your opinion on that.
It's unless one is living in the self as the self, it's very difficult to tell if another is. That's where, if you are, what you've just described is the quality of peace, the stillness, the sense of love, the feeling of love, the sense of freedom that one has while being in the presence of someone who has awakened to the self. It's beneficial where when you have a teacher that you know is already awakened, already realized, really to stay with that teacher. And then let the teacher be the one to indicate to you whether or not someone else that you're interested in would be of a benefit to follow their whatever they recommend or whatever they declare to be beneficial. In my view, I don't certainly have any reason anymore to go seeking information from or about or by teachers. It comes to me when someone asks me or someone emails me. The last couple of days, for I don't know whatever reason, I've received a couple of indications of emails from people that I have checked out and come to find out that they are conscious beings. That's what I was sharing at the table today. And when a teacher is one who actually is abiding in the heart continuously as the basis of their being, and particularly if they're in let's say in some lineage that's compatible with which is a nani, a known nani, such as Bhagavan Ramana or Nisargadatta Maharaj, then it's relatively safe to read their book or listen to their teaching or their guidance. For all they're doing, if they're in that kind of a lineage, all they're doing is indicating or pointing to one's own true nature for one to realize and abide or maintain awareness in their own true nature. But if it's someone who is on some path or recommend, or let's say they're indicating you to some path that is other than already being and already, recognize, as though you have something to do, as though there's something to be done, then they can actually be a deterrent, you see, to one sadhana. So there is why it's important, if you already have a teacher, to make sure that you're not involving yourself with a teacher or a teaching that is contrary to what the teacher's offering. Okay?
Thank you.
The truth is that we all already are the self. And the self is only one. There's not two selves. Any teacher or teaching that advocates involvement in the body-mind or improvement of oneself in the body-mind is not actually coming from the highest teaching. But not to say that there's anything wrong in a person improving the state of affairs in their body. Let's say their need for healing, but that is included if one is actually inquiring into and withdrawing attention into the self. Healing is included. That's the highest healing that can be performed. What's important is to take one into the place. The teaching should take one into the place where a person has no needs whatsoever. Where one is totally complete and free of all seeking and suffering. Okay. Okay, Nancy?
When you just said about to get to that place where there is no seeking or suffering, I've always somehow in my mind twisted that in some way, almost as an abstinence, maybe as almost a punishment, almost as again sort of giving up something. So there's always been a certain resistance or to not have desire, there's been a certain struggle. And earlier today and just now when you said that, it was so clear to me that it has nothing to do with that, because if I am in that totally free space of I amness, then there is nothing to seek. I just got a piece that I had never gotten before. It's like if I am full in the awareness of who I am, there is nothing to to get. And that has nothing to do with, resisting or not being able to have a desire. It's a whole different, I got it.
Okay. The state of desirelessness is not something that you're efforting to accomplish. To effort to accomplish it requires a desire. It's a paradox. In a manner of speaking, one must reach that place in their spiritual practice where they're desiring to be desireless. That's the paradox of it. But then there comes the recognition that there's not anything that the I that wants to be desireless can do to be desireless. Because desirelessness is when one is without the I. So as long as there's an I there desiring to be desireless, you can't be desireless. It's a paradox. Mm-hmm. But by continuing that in that direction, or with that intention, and continuing your sadhana in that manner, again, you're continuing in that intention, you reach that place where the I itself just merges with the source of itself, and desirelessness is the result. But it's not the desire, but it's not the result of something that the I itself is doing. You can say that it's a result of it not what it's not doing, or it's the end of all doing. It's sort of like ripe fruit on the tree, on the vine. When it could be whatever kind of fruit it happens to be, when the fruit has totally, completely ripened on the vine, it takes no effort for it to just fall off. See? If the fruit is not ripe on the tree and you were to try to remove it, you might even break the branch or the twig that it's growing on. But ripe fruit requires no effort to fall free. And in a similar sense, when the I has ripened in its intention to be free of itself, then it falls free into the heart or into the self, and desirelessness is the result. Or a desirelessness just happens. Yes.
Can you read from the Vajranamala? That's the next chapter from what you were reading yesterday, is desirelessness.
Yes. Not the next. It's within it, but it's not the next one, huh? No. Try that idea. It is the next chapter, and it's just a little further down the way. The mind revels in sense objects, turning away from her rightful Lord, the real self, who is bliss. This is sheer unchastity. The footnote to this verse says, here the mind is compared to an unchaste wife. Real happiness is in the self, not in objects of sense. This is definitely set forth later on. The realization of the truth of the self, whose nature is reality, consciousness, and bliss, comes easily to those who, as a result of their good deeds in past lives, are unattached to the pleasures that there are in this and other worlds. The note, all worlds are alike within relativity and are hence to be transcended. The world in which the gods live and to which good men go after death, namely heaven, is not desirable, because the happiness enjoyed there is the fruit of one's karma, and hence must come to an end, after which they must come back and be born again. The realization of the self is not easy for those whose minds are in slavery to desires. Let them attain desirelessness by profound devotion to God, who is desireless. Devotion to God means abiding in the pure being of I amness, which is prior to the mind and therefore free of desire. As one that being caught in the flood of a river and trying to reach the other shore fails to do so, being prevented by boys throwing stones at him, so those that try to attain self-realization, which is the shore of the river of samsara, that is relative existence in the world, fail to reach it, being hindered by the tendencies or taints of the mind, the vasanas or taints of the mind. The mind is usually, the note on this is, the mind is usually burdened with habits of attachment and modes of thought, accumulated and confirmed through many lives. These are called vasanas. The mind needs to be purified of these before it can take to the quest that's taught here. If the vasanas, the accumulated tendencies that come forth from the mind like soldiers from within a fort, are then and there killed by the sword of the quest of the self, the mind is finally conquered. It means constant inquiry. It means with every thought that rises, if one recognizes and acknowledges that a thought is happening, rather than completing the thought, rather than rising up in identification with the thought or going there with the thought and staying therefore identified with the mind and with thought, but rather challenges the thought by taking back the I thought itself, the thinker, back to the source of thought and merges it with the source of thought, the pure I am, pure consciousness, then the mind is finally conquered. The seeker of liberation must understand that the truth of desirelessness is the prompt extinguishment of every thought as and when it arises in its source, the heart, by the practice of inquiry, by the practice of the quest. That means annihilation of every thought as and when it arises. Not just a little bit, constant. That is for the one who is truly seeking liberation. In other words, inquiry is just not something that we do in our pastime. It's not something that we do occasionally. It's not something that we do only when troublesome thoughts arise. As far as liberation is concerned, if one is only doing inquiry when troublesome thoughts arise, then they may produce a better state of affairs. Their life can be better, but that doesn't mean that they will attain liberation by the use of inquiry. Every thought that rises is an occasion for the question, who does this thought arise? To whom does this thought arise? The answer to this being to me, the next step is to raise and keep hold of the question, who am I? Who is this I? What is this I that is having this thought? Thus, the thought itself is displaced. Practice in this manner, leads to subjugation of the mind. The ignorant look upon peace and power as two things distinct from each other. That which is peace in the introverted state of the mind is power in the mind's extroverted state. The one who has most power is the one who is at peace in the self. Peace, the cessation of the mind's restlessness, is itself the state of liberation. It is the fullness of power. Whoever has peace has all power. Powers of various kinds are desired by those who, being ignorant of the truth that's here stated, do not care for peace. That is, peace with a capital P. Their folly is described in what follows. Praying for powers such as cities, powers, which should be despised by real spiritual seekers, sadhakas. Praying for powers from God, who who is ready to give his own self to his devotee is like begging for stale food from a rich person who would give freely. The footnote, God is all. So he that who gets God himself by devotion has all. He cannot possibly have any unfulfilled wish. He attains the fulfillment of all desires at once, says the Upanishads. Jesus said the same thing when he said, Seek ye the kingdom of God first, and all these things will be added unto you. Restlessness of the mind, restfulness of the mind, meaning a restful mind, a non-moving mind, an unactive mind, is itself liberation. That being so, how can they whose minds are fixed on the attainment of powers which are to be won by mental activity ever attain the bliss of liberation? Not, the footnote says, not by striving, but by seeking to strive does the peace come which transcends the mind. The reason is that peace is our own nature, not something to be won. Those that seek to win these powers, which are called siddhis, are misguided men who forge for themselves stronger fetters than those that bind common men whose desires are pitched much lower. Like one that takes medicine to worsen his disease, those that are deluded by the sense, I am the body, which is the root cause of all ills, seek to attain durability of the body by practicing tapas, austerities. This word, tapas, seems to be untranslatable into English, there being no single word in the English language for it. The meaning can be gathered from particular forms of tapas, such as meditation, worship of God, self-denial, or self-restraint in various forms, which are called tapas. These are practiced either for winning boons from God or simply for mental purification, preparatory to the pursuit of the quest of the real self. So going back to that verse, one that takes medicine to worsen his disease is like those who are deluded by the sense I am the body and who are seeking to attain durability of the body through practicing tapas. Do you all get that? Anyone who is practicing tapas to extend life in the body. There are people who would like to extend their life in the body, to live longer. Okay? Well, they are like someone who is taking medicine to worsen the disease. Okay, you got it? You see, we believe ordinarily, when we are identified with the body mind, those who believe, who are identified with the body mind, believe that life in the body is the basic existence, and so are ever striving to extend their existence in their body. But the sages indicate, as the Master Jesus did, that this world, the body and this world, is not the basis of pure existence. It's not one's natural state. The Master Jesus said, "My kingdom," what?
It's not of this
Not
world.
of this world.
Yes, "my kingdom is not of this world." Most Christians are doing everything they can to extend their life in this world. That's not being said in judgment. It's being said based upon the ignorance of people who actually still are identified with the body and the mind as being the self. Yes.
That analogy of the soldiers coming out of the fort to be needing annihilation, and that anything that doesn't annihilate the thoughts is in effect
Arming the fort.
Yeah. Now, there's one approach to or to meditation or dealing with thoughts, of accepting that the thoughts are there but not identifying with them and letting them pass like clouds in the sky in one illustration. Well, that's not annihilating them. In effect, it's watching, looking at them as they continue. And it's like saying, yes, there's a thought, but I'm not going there, and letting it go. Well, is that the same as just annihilating it? Letting it pass and non-existence?
It's according to where you are in consciousness. It's where the sadhaka, the seeker, is in consciousness. If you've reached that place in consciousness, which is a state of maturity, to where you can make the distinction between you the thinker, and you the awareness of being. You the thinker, while you are still identified with thoughts, you see, it's far more it's more beneficial. It's to your benefit to annihilate them. But if you've reached the place of maturity, maybe I'm approaching it from the back door from the way I started saying it. When you've reached the maturity of realizing that you are just the awareness, then as awareness, you can observe the thoughts. Do not identify with the thoughts. Do not identify with the sense of being the thinker, but just watch the thoughts rise and complete themselves, and they will complete themselves. So it's based upon where you are in your own maturity. You see, if you are in the place in which you are in the awareness, as the awareness, and that's where the base of your being is now grounded, then when thoughts arise, then there is no I that rises up with those thoughts, identifying with those thoughts. But if you've not reached that level of spiritual maturity, and when thoughts are happening, they feel like they're happening to me, the one who is the thinker, then you must take that I that thinks that it's you, that you think that you are, the thinker, and withdraw it back into the pure being and merge it there. And thereby you dissolve the thought that you were otherwise having, and ultimately you dissolve the thinker. Okay? Again, redundantly, when you've practiced that long enough to where you become rather proficient in your ability to just remain in the awareness, then when thoughts arise, you observe them, note that they're there, and don't go there. You don't give them any life. But you remain free in the awareness of the self, which is thoughtless awareness, watching what's going on, but not identifying with what's going on. Okay?
So inquire as long as there's an I to inquire, and that's the only and best way to annihilate thoughts and annihilate the I that's the thinker.
Exactly. Exactly. But the time comes when you will you'll reach such a pure place in awareness that you yourself can easily make the distinction that these thoughts are actually just going on in the body mind, and I am not the body mind. And that won't be a thought. That will be direct revelation, direct insight, direct knowing. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Are we getting off to this? Once upon a time, a sage said, a dog enjoys with a bitch the same pleasures that Indra, the chief of the gods in heaven, enjoys with Indrani, his consort. Note, the gods here mentioned are somewhat analogous to the angels of the Christian lore. They live in a heaven of their own and have a king over them who is known as Indra, and his spouse is named Indrani. The enlightened man thinks, quotes, I am enjoying these pleasures, The unenlightened man thinks, I am enjoying these pleasures, and is thus ever deluded by the craving for pleasures. He does not know the truth of the matter, namely, that the pleasures are eating up his vitality. The serpent kills by biting, but the five-mouthed serpent, named desire for enjoying sense objects, kills through mere thought or sight of the objects. The five-mouthed serpent, what is that?
Senses.
That's the five senses. The senses pertain to the body. So as long as we stay identified with the body as being the self, we're still living at the effect of the senses. And then all of the pleasures that are inherent in body-mind identification that are seen to be desirable, you see, and that we indulge in, are in truth eating up the vitality of the self. Do we get that? That includes even the sexual desire. That as long as we continue to indulge in that particular desire, which is in most religious traditions are considered even to be, like in Christianity, is considered to be the original sin. It's not the original sin. The original sin is identification with the body as being the self, is the original sin, including then identification with all of the senses and then pleasures in this world that keeps us identified with the body and the pursuit of pleasures or desire for the attainment of pleasures in this world. The happiness that is enjoyed in sleep or in a swoon, or when something desired is won, or when something hated is destroyed, is due to the temporary union of the mind with the self in the heart. Do we get that one? One should know that the pleasures that are believed to arise from sense objects both are in the other worlds, are really minute fractions of the happiness of self-realization and not at all independent. The hungry man is satisfied by eating unappetizing food, just as if he had eaten tasty food. It follows that pleasure is not from the object of pleasure, but from the cessation of the desire for it. Do we get it? The note says, earthly enjoyment is here shown to be due to the temporary quiescence, quieting of the mind in the heart, due to the cessation of desire While desire prevailed, the natural happiness of the self was obstructed. When it ceased, that happiness became free from obstruction. No new happiness is ever created. If it were otherwise, insipid food could never be tasted, which it is, could be tasty, which it is sometimes. Do we get it? A dog gets pleased tasting its own blood when it chews a bone without any meat on it. Likewise, men are infatuated over sense objects, enjoying really only the happiness that is their own. I think we've all probably heard that analogy before. Even after experiencing great happiness in sleep, where there are no objects, man desires objects for the sake of pleasure, because of ignorance due to want of inquiry. Are we getting the point with regard to desirelessness? Okay. Has this been a good weekend? Just remain in this very quality as the stillness of your own being, and remain at peace and be happy. Namaste.